Howdy, all. I'm Professor Parks, PhD, and I do content on astronomy, science skepticism, and astronomy. Let me start that over. I do content on astronomy, science skepticism, and mental health. And today is part of my Shouting into the Void, where I do a live stream where I just basically shout into the void about anything that really comes to mind. So just to check in on me, just kind of a quick mental health check-in, as I described on my last Shouting into the Void. I fell into depression over the last few weeks and was still, I wasn't bedridden, but I was, not functional, shall we say. But yesterday I was unable to take a shower, so I am going to do that today. That is on my to-do list. But I was able to actually get into the office and do a few things. Not as productive as I would have liked, but still I was able to actually do stuff. So, it's on the plus side, I was able to accomplish that, and I'm going to hang my hat on it. My cat is doing something in the kitchen. Anyway, packing a plastic bag, I think. Where was I going with this? So yeah. I'm feeling a lot more energized than I did yesterday, so I don't know if this is normal, if this is at my baseline, or if this is getting into a hypomanic situation. I don't know. We'll see. But I'm energized enough that I was able to come on stream today. So, and I'm doing a couple of things. Lighting situation, I have no idea. And I also... Audio-visual in my home setup is constantly evolving, and I have no idea how to, I'm constantly going to be tinkering with it. Anyway, so right now, one of the problems I'm having is, with the light levels. So I have found the way to, on StreamYards, they don't have a dark mode for reasons I don't understand, but I managed to open it up full screen, so that's not just a screen on a white screen. What I don't know is whether or not I can see the chat, because I've never done this before. Anyway, so we'll hopefully I got it set so that I can see the chat if anyone actually comes on and respond to anyone. So what am I going to ramble on today about? Well, I'm going to be talking about something I've talked about in a previous stream, and that is the concept of significance in the context of the universe we live in. And every semester, in every astronomy class that I teach, I always start off with the pale blue dot. And what that is this. Give you some context. The pale blue dot was an image taken by Voyager 2. I always get these the two Voyagers confused. I'm pretty sure it's Voyager 2. It's the one that went out to Neptune. And flat earthers might appreciate this. One of the PIs on the Voyager project was Carl Sagan. And right about the orbit of Saturn, basically when they thought that maybe the mission would fail, because the mission, both Voyager 1 and Voyager 2, were only designed to last out to Saturn. And so anything beyond that was gravy. It is crack mode for Luna. So everything else beyond that was gravy. And like a few different NASA achievements, they have long passed their expiration dates. They are still active. They are still transmitting signals back. And both of them have now, I believe both of them, Voyager 1 did it a decade or so ago. Voyager 2, I think, has now passed what is known as the heliopause. The heliopause is where effectively the solar wind hits the interstellar wind caused by other stars and is no longer able to really beat it back, is no longer able to prevent it from coming in. So it's basically kind of like a bubble, which could, in a way, define our solar system. That's the area where the sun is a bully enough that it's basically pushing out most of the material that from intergalactic space might pop in, or at least small material. Anyway, so what I'm saying is that humanity now has two interstellar craft, if you wish to define it that way. Getting back to Voyager 2 and the pale blue dot, what we find is, or what Sagan was concerned about was, all right, he was like, Voyager 2 might die fairly soon. So how about we just turn it around and take a picture of Earth? Because this, at this point, which is, Lord, I think it's in the mid-90s. I could be very wrong. It was launched in 76. I don't know when, memory escapes me as to when it was at Saturn. Anyway, definitely during that time, no craft had been as far as Voyager 2. So if they were to take a picture of Earth at that point, that would be the furthest anything had ever seen, anything created by humanity, had seen the Earth. It would be a monumental image, a groundbreaking image. Well, unfortunately, he really couldn't convince his collaborators that this was worthwhile to doing, because it would be technically challenging getting it to orient around, and there were some problems with the antenna, yada yada. And so he got a little bit of pushback behind it. And they're like, we still have a little bit more oomph with the system or with the satellite. So, why don't we want to spend our resources actually getting as much science as we possibly can, rather than just taking a pretty picture of, or possibly a provocative picture of the Earth. Well, anyway, when Voyager 2 managed to get past Neptune, and at this point had done phenomenal or groundbreaking images, or done groundbreaking work taking data from Uranus and Neptune, at this point, it had nothing to look at. Like, Pluto was not even a possible target because the orbits weren't, the planets weren't aligned. Voyagers used a lot of gravity assists in order to get out that far, and so there was no reasonable way to redirect Voyager 2 to Jupiter or to Pluto at that point. So basically, they're like, all right, we're now in dead space. There's really nothing for us to really look like. Sagan was like, there is one thing you can look at, and that would be Earth. And so finally, around the orbit of, at the distance of Pluto, which again, that's 40 AU, or roughly 40 AU. An AU is the distance between the Earth and the Sun, 149 million kilometers. So multiply that by 40 and you get the distance. Anyway, he finally managed to convince them, hey, let's turn around and look at Pluto. And so the first image over here is, let's see if I can get it enlarged. Does this thing have zoom? Zoom in. Good enough. This is the image that was taken, sans the Earth and, arrow pointing at it. And so this is what the Earth looks like from the position of a Plutonian, someone who lives on Pluto, for example. This is what they would see given a telescope of Voyager size, or the camera of Voyager. Those lights, which I had originally thought were image artifacts, aren't quite image artifacts. They are, in fact, sunbeams. They are, you can think of them as image artifacts, but if you look at any kind of bright light, you're going to see lens flare. And essentially that's what this is lens flare off of the sun. And it just so happens that the Earth is in one of these sunbeams. here is another or closer up image of it. So there you go. Hence why Sagan refers to this as the pale blue dot. Now, the reason why is it blue is because of oceans and clouds. Well, bluish white. The Earth is roughly 70% covered in oceans, and those tend to be blue. And so that's where the blue comes from. And then you have the clouds that are ubiquitous over the Earth's surface, and that contributes the whiteness to it. Well, what does this have to do with the price of tea in China? Well, I am going to read you what I read my students, my astronomy students, every semester at the beginning of the semester, day one. And I'm actually going to go a bit further. I'm going to read essentially the entire quotation. Typically, I only read the first part of it. Let's see, where am I going? Where is it? It's in chapter 1. All right. Look again at that dot. That's here. That's home. That's us. On it, everyone you love, everyone you know, everyone you've ever heard of, every human being who ever was, lived out their lives. The aggregate of our joy and suffering, thousands of confident religions, ideologies, and economic doctrines, every hunter and forager, every hero and coward, every creator and destroyer of civilization, every king and peasant, every young couple in love, every mother and father, hopeful child, inventor and explorer, every teacher of morals, every corrupt politician, every superstar, every supreme leader, every sinner and saint in the history of our species lived there on a mote of dust suspended in a sunbeam. The Earth is a very small stage in a vast cosmic arena. Think of the rivers of blood spilt by all those generals and emperors so that in glory and triumph, they could become the momentary masters of a fraction of a dot. Think of the endless cruelties visited by the inhabitants of one corner of this pixel on the scarcely distinguishable inhabitants of some other corner, how frequently their misunderstandings, how eager they are to kill one another, how fervent their hatreds. Our posturing, our imagined self-importance, the delusion that we have some privileged position in the universe are challenged by this point of pale light. Our planet is a lonely speck in a great enveloping cosmic dark. In our obscurity, in all this vastness, there is no hint that help will come from elsewhere to save us from ourselves. The Earth is the only world known so far to harbor life. There's nowhere else, at least in the near future, to which our species can migrate. Visit, yes. Settle, not yet. Like it or not, for the moment, the Earth is where we make our stand. Usually I end with the mode of light because it's more poetic. But what I wanted to touch on was the latter parts of it. And I've been familiar with Carl Sagan for a while. I didn't grow up with Cosmos. Cosmos aired sometime in my youth, I think. But it just wasn't on my radar at that point. And I really have never gone back and actually watched it. Mainly because, as odd as it may sound, I've never really been into pop science. I've never been into programs that popularize astronomy. And that's ironic to me because that's actually something I want to do, maybe as even a second career is pop science. So I've started diving into it. Anyway, what I'm trying to say is that I'm more familiar with Sagan's work to a certain extent. I've seen his interviews. I've read I've read A Demon Haunted World. And so I felt that I had a handle on his ideals. I know that he is an atheist, or was an atheist. He has since passed. And that's basically it, is that I knew that he was an atheist. And in The Demon Haunted World, which is an excellent book, and he talks about how we as a species can take or often conflate psychological trauma or psychological events as spiritual events. And what I found to be even more kind of compelling is that we have now moved, as the United States at least has become more secular than Europe back in the 1600s. The same sorts of events, which used to be attributed to demonic possession, are now being attributed to alien abduction. There is a marked simulation, or at least that's what similarity, or at least that's what Sagan claims, in the accounts of people who experienced demonic possession back in the Middle Ages or later, and folks who have abduction stories. I have a lot, and I've also seen the movie Contact, which is based off his book, which I have yet to read. And I thought that it was very well done in terms of the dialogue between Jodie Foster's character, who is also an atheist, modeled after Jill Tarter, from my understanding, or his friend Anne. I don't know. Basically, she is his voice. Like when she talks about the universe, you are hearing Sagan's perspective. Matthew McConaughey, oh, hey, all right. He is the love interest, but he is deeply religious. I don't remember if he is some kind of clergyman, but he is he is a spiritual leader of some form or another. And they have conversations about what it means to be in a universe so vast. And I really like those conversations because it was presented in such a way as that no one won. Neither side, the movie didn't say one way or the other really as to who was right. They left it open for the audience, and I really, really appreciated it, particularly at the time. So I was a bit surprised when I finally picked up A Pale Blue Dot, which is the book that quotation comes from, that quotation that I've been telling my students for years, that particularly in the second paragraph that I read, that he takes a radically different view of significance than I do. In my discussions with people who are science skeptics, flat earthers, people who deny that space exists, moon landing hoaxers, or what have you, if I have a conversation long enough with them, or if I encounter them in text, comment sections or Discord long enough, ultimately they will invariably, not obviously not in all cases, they will say something akin of, I cannot believe that we are insignificant in this. We are on a speck of dust in a vast infinite void of nothingness, or something to that effect. And to me, what really, when I read that first paragraph and I think about what's compelling to me with that first paragraph is, and one of the reasons why I love astronomy the way that I do, is because astronomy it forces me to open my perspective. I think it is very common for folks to see things in their world, put on blinders, and basically believe that is their entire existence. That is, these events that are happening to them are fundamental. And to a certain extent, perhaps they are. Obviously, if you're in the middle of a war zone, or if you have, God forbid, cancer or some kind of life-threatening condition, yeah, that's an existential crisis. But if we're talking about, just everyday kind of things, I'm not saying that those are unimportant. But what I am saying is that there is a larger picture out there. There is a larger framework in which all of this is happening. And all of this is happening in a very, very tiny speck, corner, as it were, of the universe. And it forces me to look at my life in that context. It forces me to look at the trials and tribulations of my life in terms of I am but one little thing in just a vast multitude. The entirety of the human species, we have tomes of books detailing our achievements, our failures, going into gory detail or uplifting. Don't have the word for it. Uplifting insight to the things that are glorious. We have all this stuff, and yet we are a blink of an eye on a tiny speck in the middle of nowhere. Well, they're in the middle of a infinite vast void. When confronted with that, so both Sagan and I seem to have that same viewpoint, seem to think or seem to understand that we are small in the vastness of things. And he and I take that point, take that observation, and go in completely different directions in terms of how to interpret that observation. And he apparently takes the view of, I'll say, flat earthers, in the sense that they look at that as being insignificant, which in a way is somewhat ironic in that he is an atheist. He looks at that and basically says that, or at least this is my interpretation, is that he looks at this and basically says, we are not special, so therefore there is no God, sort of thing. And with flat earthers, that was, maybe I misspoke earlier. Flat earthers reject that because of the fact that they just cannot conceive or do not want to conceive of a universe in which they do not contribute to really anything of quote unquote significance. And it's that significance part that I really want to hone in on. And again, I've talked about this in previous videos and streams. So for those of you who have supported me in the past, I apologize if this is a bit repetitive, but I think it's something that needs to be said, and it needs to be said often. Now, obviously, as a man of faith, there are things that are prompting my viewpoint in a certain direction. I will leave those off and just talk about just the end result of it. When I think of us as a point of dust, a mote in a sunbeam in a vast infinite cosmos, to me that means that I am exceedingly significant. Because, as he points out, we're it. The chances of there being intelligent life that can encounter our planet, that encounter the human species, are very small. The science is telling us that is probably not going to happen. The chances of that happening are slim, or at least that's my interpretation of the current science. Others have more of an optimistic view. But we are it. That we certainly, it would be just an amazing act of possibly divine intervention if we were to actually find human beings on some other world. Because of the nature of evolution, because of the nature of how life evolves, because it is so environmentally dependent, the chances of us finding Homo sapiens somewhere else in the universe, to me, is just, pun intended, astronomically small. So we're it. We are the representatives of our species. We will not find, and you cannot find us anywhere else. And I think that makes us excitingly significant, exceedingly rare. I mean, think about conservation efforts. I mean, we're looking at, conservationists are looking at populations that are in the hundreds. Now, if you compare those population numbers, if you hang your hat on the idea that population is some form of significance, some definition of significance, small compared to large, then conservationists are arguing, no. These 1,000 humpback whales, which apparently are now like flourishing, back in the 90s, these 1,000 humpback whales, this is worth saving. This is worth us inconveniencing our lives, inconvenience through laws and regulations. This is worth the effort. Why? Because it is significant. And in an analogous way, that is why I see this, is that we are precious, because it is so easy, cosmically speaking, for us to not exist anymore. We have developed a way to eradicate pretty much all life on this planet. We have enough nuclear weapons that if they, in however likely an event, they were to be used in multitudes, we could very well cause a mass extinction. We have the idea, we also contend with the idea that, the Earth used to be peppered with impacts, asteroids, comets, what have you. And that has slowly decreased as the number of impactors in the solar system has decreased over time, because once they impact, they're done. They're gone. But they're not all gone. And actually, there are still millions upon millions, at least estimated, of these things out there. And so it is possible, I won't say how likely, but it is definitely possible for one of these impactors to hit the Earth and really mess with someone's day, or a lot of someone's days. And right now, we don't really have the technology to prevent that from happening. And then, of course, there's the environmental crisis, which is existential. The climate crisis, if we cannot get a handle on it, then I think the best that we can hope for is that we have a huge death toll where our population goes from millions to possibly hundreds of thousands, and then we kind of start over from there. Or we get eradicated, or we actually die off. The environment becomes so unfavorable to human life that we effectively become extinct over a fairly short time frame. So I think that human life is exceedingly important because we need to take care of it. Again, I have my own spiritual reasons for why that needs to be done. But I think everyone can agree that that needs to happen, that people are precious, that life is precious, that we need to take care of it. Sagan goes on for a few more chapters, honestly, more than I think is relevant, because honestly, the subtitle of this book is A Vision of the Human Future in Space. So I'm thinking, all right, so this is going to be kind of an uplifting material book talking about the future endeavors and reasons for why we need to stretch our wings and move out into this infinite cosmos. Well, he might do that, but at least in the first couple chapters, no, he doubles down on the idea that we are insignificant. He goes through the history, essentially, of the rejection of the anthrocentric principle or anthropic principle, where the anthropic principle basically says that the human beings occupy a special position in the universe. So we first started off by thinking that the Earth was stationary and fixed, and it was the center of the solar system, or center of not just the solar system, but the universe as a whole. We then move into the Copernican heliocentric age, where we now know that the Earth is going around the sun, but there was still the view that, okay, well, all right, we're going around the sun, but the sun is the center of the universe. So we are significant adjacent, as it were, in terms of position. Then if we evolved and we found in the late 1800s, we started finding these gaseous nebulae, and we understood that our galaxy, or that the universe was much larger than our own solar system, and that the stars in the night sky were part of a much larger structure. There was the Great Debate, and in that Great Debate, one of the participants, a gentleman by the name of A. Curtis, held that, okay, well, we have this universe, we have the Milky Way galaxy, but we're in the center of it. His opponent, Harlow Shapley, said, no. We are actually off to the side. And he had distance measurements, fairly accurate distance measurements, to actually back up that claim. So now, but we still had some who held the position, all right, well, if the sun isn't the center of the universe, at least it's the center of the Milky Way galaxy. We have now since found the evidence is pointing to the idea that in fact, we are not at the center of the universe. And even more provocative, there is no center of the universe. There is no specific position. And so Sagan goes through all of that, and he continually uses words like we're in the boondocks or whatever. It seems to me that his idea of significance is positional, or in an opposite way of conservationists, significance is size. We are only significant if we hold a special physical position in space, or if we are the entirety of something. I completely disagree. I think that is from a, shall we say, humanistic standpoint, that is just completely missing the point of the specialness of how precious, so I have a ring light. How precious human life is. It doesn't matter where we are. It doesn't matter what position we exist in the universe. And it ultimately doesn't matter how many of us there are, be it 1,000, tens of thousands, billions, trillions. It doesn't matter. The number of a species does not indicate how significant it is. I would argue that it's all significant, that we are precious. Anything that has life to it, I think, is precious. And I haven't really thought of it, but I would be able to be convinced that anything in creation is, in fact, precious, because it's all part of the same creation. What I think that he and I can agree on is that we are custodians of this world. And again, bringing religion back into it, the Bible tells us that we are custodians. I think it's a little bit the interpretation that some folks have about Genesis, I think, is a little bit it's taken too far. It's more arrogant that basically we are the masters of our environment. No. We are not. Nothing is subservient to us. We are the custodians. We are those that, because we have been blessed with free will, we have been blessed with a higher intelligence, that we have the capacity, more so than any other species that we know of, we have the capacity to alter and shape the environment that we live in, good or bad. We can make the environment better, or we, as I've just said, we can utterly destroy it. And that comes the responsibility. And I'm not going to say it, no matter how many times you might be shouting at the screen to say it, I'm not going to say it. But we do have a responsibility. I think that provides an obligation, call it moral, call it ethical, what have you, that provides an obligation that we need to have this larger context, that our lives are not just simply the lives that we see every day, the interactions that we see every day, that we need to some real extent to acknowledge that we are a part of a global community. See what I did there? That there are other people. And I'm not even talking about, obviously the war in Gaza is constantly on my mind because of the immense amount of suffering that is currently happening there. But you don't have to go that far. They're suffering very close to me. In certain parts of Washington, D.C., there are a number of impoverished families. I don't know how they're suffering or whatever, but their lives are their quality of life is, I would guess, was significantly less than mine. And that bothers me. And I think that hopefully that bothers other people. And that the fact that we are so small in comparison to such a larger area that obligates us to take care of one another, that obligates us to shepherd, as it were, or, I keep saying take care of nurturing one another, of making sure that we don't have suffering, that everyone is treated with compassion and empathy, that obviously we can go on, and maybe I will at some point, go on to this idea of what is natural, what is artificial, whether or not it is actually correct for us to fuck with our atmosphere, fuck with the environment, because we are imperfect beings and, we could be doing more harm than good when we do things like introduce GMOs or, God forbid, actually launch mirrors into space to redirect sunlight, but obviously, I think that we need to do these things. I believe that GMOs are actually a net positive, because if not, then we would not have the capacity of food production that we have today. But it needs to be intelligent. We are intelligent beings, and so therefore our motion or our future, our progression needs to be intelligent. It needs to be thoughtful. And it needs to take into consideration that we are not alone. The argument or the thing that kind of drives me nuts. Sorry, Robot Chicken reference. Is the climate crisis debate. They're like, oh, we need to eradicate fossil fuels. We need to get rid of them. We need renewable energy. Okay. Great. We think about how we're going to create an infrastructure in this country that is renewable based, geo, solar, wind, what have you. What we seem to be forgetting in that conversation is that we're rich. We are very well off as a nation. Obviously, we got some poor people in this country. But I'm saying as a nation, our resources as a nation, we are very wealthy. Other countries don't have that. And in certain countries, they really don't have that. And so the idea of eradicating fossil fuels is, in my opinion, bigoted. Because when you have developing nations, they're developing along the same sorts of lines that we did, but they're doing it slower for whatever reason. But they are evolving in a technological way akin to us. They start off with simpler technologies, which such as fossil fuel burning, and they are, making them more efficient, yada yada. It's a loose analogy. I'm not trying to say that the two are very similar in any way, but there is a correlation there in my view. And to say India, nope, you can't do any fossil fuels. You need to eradicate those. Saudi Arabia, your entire economy is based on oil. Fuck off. You need to switch to solar. If we're going to do that, part of this conversation, which I have yet to hear, is that we need to do something Americans really don't like doing, and that is sharing. If we develop technologies that are green friendly in this country, we need to be able to give it away, or at least give it away for cheap. Give it away so that these nations can actually afford to switch from fossil fuels to renewable energy without introducing undue suffering. Because again, our lives ain't it. Our lives are but a small fraction of the entire global community. And so that's what I'm talking about in terms of perspective. That's what I'm talking about in terms of when I read that, particularly that first paragraph, I think is inspired. Obviously, I read it to all my students, and I want them to be inspired by it because I reject the idea that because we live in a world, a multitude of worlds, in a vast universe in terms of space and time, that means we're insignificant. I absolutely refute that. I diametrically oppose that. And I think it's a dangerous thought to have. If you say that we are insignificant, if you tell someone you're insignificant in the terms of the universe, what the fuck are you talking about? What are you trying? What is your end goal there? Are they going to be like, oh yeah, okay, I'm insignificant, and then get that, and then decide, hey, I have a new purpose in life, which is to be significant? I don't know. What is your point in telling people that they are insignificant? So I guess my point of view is, Carl, why did you write those few chapters? Maybe in later chapters, and I hope in later chapters, he comes back and talks about the fact that since we are so insignificant, that we are in such a small position, that it is our obligation to expand outward, to make us more significant by making us more populous or whatever. I think that's where he's going. I think that's what he is going to be. He's using the insignificant argument as the core of why we need to make our species larger, to move out to these other worlds, to explore the universe that has been provided to us in some attempt to make us significant. I agree with the sentiment. If that is in fact what he's saying, I agree with that sentiment. I think that, again, for my own, I have spiritual reasons for it, but I have practical reasons for it. I believe that humanity needs to expand because we are going to find things that we haven't even dreamt of. Just look at exoplanets. We are finding exoplanets that have no analogs within our own solar system. We are finding worlds out there that were only within the comprehension of sci-fi writers. They are, and with new discoveries comes new perspective. With new discoveries, that allows us more tools to use to make life better, to understand life, to understand how the nature of things are. Is relativity the actual best description of gravity? We won't know unless we expand our understanding, unless we build telescopes like Euclid, which I'm going to talk about that in a later stream. Euclid is awesome. It's not getting the press that it deserves. I'm in love with the Euclid. Again, I think it's because America, we don't want to talk about those European people, even though we did actually contribute to Euclid, although it's mainly German. Anyway, Euclid is awesome. we need to look at. That is why astronomy is important. It talks about our perspective in the universe. It talks about what the universe actually is and what fundamental things that we kind of take for granted are. Gravity. What is that? Is it classically determined or is it relativistically determined? I think these have impacts to the nature of how we view the universe. So yeah, I guess that's my stump speech. That's my opinion on significance. I'm going to see if there's actually people in the chat. No, hopefully. So no one is going to actually see this live. All right, well, cool. I forgot to put the ticker on. At least I don't think so. I'm hoping this has been recorded, being recorded somewhere. Anyway, if you do come across this, if I haven't screwed up something technologically and you like this, thank you for watching it. I really appreciate any kind of eyeballs. It is humbling to me that anyone would want to actually hear what I have to say about anything. But I truly, it is important to fight this idea that astronomy shows us that we are insignificant, that astronomy shows us that there is no God. More so the first part. Obviously, folks have their own opinions about God, but for definitely that first part. Astronomy is not trying to tell us that we don't matter. In fact, quite the opposite. Is that I think the more we learn about the universe, the more we find that we are truly unique in that universe. So at some other point, I'm reading this a chapter a day. Incidentally, one of the things I'm also branching into or getting more into is looking into teaching research, pedagogy, that sort of thing. And one of the things that they tell us, that the research is telling us, is this concept of interweaving. So a student learns better, actually, if you interweave ideas. So you basically have the student learn of either through lecture or text or what have you for a fairly short amount of time, maybe less than an hour. And then they switch to something different. Maybe not radically different, although there is evidence that says that radically different is actually helpful, but something different. And then come back to it. And then so forth and so on. So that's kind of what I'm doing nowadays is I'm only reading a chapter a day. And I'm hoping that it sticks with me better than just, marathoning my way through it. Because I want to be able to remember this for a long time. And if I read multiple books, I think it's time effective. I'm also reading Kant's critique of why am I flubbing on the name? Critique of rational thought, I think. Hold on. Critique of pure reason. That's what this is. I gotta say, Immanuel Kant, real pissant. He is, in terms of readability, for me, he's more Whitehead than he is Nietzsche. I find Nietzsche to be extremely readable. Whitehead I find to be fucking incomprehensible. Heidenberg I find to be kind of gobbledygook. Not saying his ideas are wrong in any way, but when I read it, all I hear is gobbledygook. So that's on me. On him for not being clear in his writing. So So yeah, this is slower going. The chapters are longer, so I don't quite read an entire chapter a day, because, like I said, it's more thought provoking. It's denser, so it's difficult for me. But so far, yeah, he hasn't irritated me like or like Sartre did. Fucking hate Sartre. Um, anyway, what is that? So yeah, I think I am going to sign off now, and bid you all a good day, night, whatever. What happens? Thank you for. I'm going to run the outro in a sec. It hasn't been. It's still the patron section. It still needs to be reformatted. But thank you to my patrons, Norman, Dora, and of course Judy. And thank you for their support that you've given me with this channel. If you wish to help support myself with this channel, and more specifically the observatory that I work at, funds have been used to help support the student club. And as I've said before, more recently, we've bought a planetary camera that has greatly upgraded our previous ability to take video of planets, which I'm hoping we can really showcase or I can really showcase in later streams once I figure out all the bugs and the weather gets better. Anyway, if you consider to support please consider becoming a Patreon. In the description, which I'll add in later, you can also use PayPal if you'd like. So, but just watching, just being here, just listening to all this, giving me the views and all that kind of good stuff. It's like I said, it's humbling that anyone would really give a shit about what I have to say about anything. So with that, clear skies and peace out. Here comes the wonderful